Good afternoon to everyone here in the room in this amazing waterfront venue in Stockholm. And hello and welcome to all of you joining online. I hope you've brought your popcorn. We are in a cinema and the next 90 minutes is going to be as gripping as Barbie and Oppenheimer, I'm sure. So let's settle in. World Water Week is inspiring, energizing, a little frantic. I'm sure we've all had a packed agenda of events, meetings, socializing, partying. Many of you may be still jet lagged. So, it's also the graveyard slot here in Stockholm. It's 2 p.m. So I'd like to just spend some time, a few seconds, grounding ourselves and take in this beautiful scene we have here on the screen. So put your phones to one side, can wiggle your toes, roll those shoulders, take a few deep breaths, take a little stretch in your seats. I don't see anyone standing up yet, but if you want to stand up and have a full-blown shake around, then please do so. 90 minutes is a long time to be sat down through it all. We're going to have a few seconds of stillness in this world that really doesn't do stillness, and remind ourselves why we're here. And that is to protect places like this one and the ecosystems and the people dependent on them. So I'm just going to stand awkwardly here for 15 seconds or so. I hope that the volume will be turned up so you can hear beautiful bird sounds and the sound of the bubbling brook in your headphones. Okay, less tranquil, seeing as we have neighbours here. But let's look ahead at what we have on store for you over the next hour and a half. I hope that by the time you leave the room or when the live stream cuts out, you'll have a better understanding of how the private sector is taking action on water and the innovative business solutions and enablers that have the potential to really catalyze transformation. If you're a company, hands up if you're representing a company here. Oh, good. I would say that's around 80% of you in the room. Sorry, I can't see hands up online. But I'm hoping that you'll feel excited to kickstart or accelerate further positive action on water security within your organization. So I do have, okay, fantastic. You can see all the lovely fish now. So we'll achieve this in 3 ways. First, we'll be diving into a report that CDP, the organization I work for, published back in March this year, which focuses on the water-related opportunities that companies are seizing. Secondly, we have a 10-minute fireside, or should I say riverside chat with Marianne from Danone, to really explore in depth how they're prioritizing water opportunities and the interventions that have stemmed from this. Last, we'll be welcoming representatives, both in person and online, from 3 different organizations. We have a think tank, we have an investor, and we have the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, EFRAG. We'll be welcoming them on stage and online for a discussion on where the push for action is coming from and how these opportunities can be scaled up. This will be the time for Q&A, so please do store your questions for then. But before we start, hello, let me introduce myself. My name is Miriam Denny-Lesev, and I work in CDP's water security team. So for those of you who may be unfamiliar with who CDP is and what we do, it's probably good for me to give you a bit of background, a bit of an overview. So CDP is an international not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to secure a thriving economy that works for people and planet in the long term. Our focus from a water perspective is to ensure that the way that businesses are run, financial institutions conduct their affairs, and cities are run in a way that aligns with a water secure future. And we do this in two ways. Firstly, we run the world's only global disclosure mechanism for corporate water-related data. We operate this annual mechanism in the form of a questionnaire, a rather long questionnaire, issued on behalf of more than 700 financial institutions that control over $150 trillion in assets under management. Through these financial institutions, we invite close to 9,000 corporates to disclose every year. Corporate water disclosure to CDP has grown exponentially over the last 5 years, in fact, by 85%. All of this is voluntary. Last year, nearly 4,000 of the world's largest corporations disclosed data on their water-related risks, their opportunities, their strategies, investments, and actions, all through CDP. These companies are from every sector. We have apparel, H&M and LVMH. We have Vale and Anglo American representing the mining industry, and National Grid and Veolia from the infrastructure industry, Ecolab and Microsoft from the services sector. I could go on, but you get the gist. Secondly, we leverage this data and our global network of businesses and financial institutions to bring about policy change. An example of this is a letter that we coordinated in the run-up to the UN 2023 Water Conference this year, signed by investors controlling $7 trillion of assets, calling for more government ambition during the summit. So all of CDP's work is really centered around the understanding that financial institutions need to play a vital role in safeguarding nature because, as we all know, the door to act on water is closing fast. So this is the time for the popcorn, and it's also the time for me to cringe massively as we have a video. Here it is. The private sector has never been more engaged on water security. Voluntary disclosure of water data is higher than ever, showing a strong awareness of the huge risks of the water crisis and the opportunities that come from tackling it. Companies are already riding the wave of water-related opportunity, incentivized to create innovative, water-smart products and get ahead of regulation and consumer demand. Across every industry, these opportunities are helping companies tap into new markets, boost production capacity, build resilience, and gain competitive advantage. This is the foundation for transforming our economies and societies. Banks, insurers, and investors hold the power to accelerate and mainstream this sustainable transition of water-impactful industries. Through CDP, 275 of the world's largest financial institutions across all 6 continents have demonstrated commitment to act on water. The value is clear, with opportunities of up to $203 billion already reported by just 23 financial institutions. But it doesn't stop there. Water is the bloodstream of the biosphere. Tackling the water crisis also benefits public health, alleviates poverty, creates jobs, enhances food security, climate mitigation and adaptation, increases biodiversity, and protects ecosystems.
That's why cities are also starting to step up. Nearly half of the 1,090 cities reporting to CDP have set adaptation goals addressing water-related risks. Today, private companies are calling for stronger water regulation to guide the way forward. National governments must build on this progress by setting ambitious policies, including mandatory water disclosure, to drive action even further. There has never been a better time for governments to act. Disclosure is a critical first step, but the world needs stronger policies to protect our valuable fresh water, unlock further capital and economic potential, and ensure a water-secure future for us all.
So glad that's over. There's nothing like hearing the sound of your own voice. We wanted to ask Matt Damon and Leonardo DiCaprio, but they were busy, unfortunately. But Matt and Leo, if you're watching this, then do get in touch. My email address will be shared at the end of the session. But let's go back to the report. Let's go. Oh, really don't want to play that again. Here we go. Over this last few years, CDP has drawn attention to the financial materiality of water risks for the private sector. So the last global water report published in 2021 showed that the financial impact of water-related risks disclosed by companies was more than $300 billion, which was 5 times higher than the cost of actually addressing them. Since then, our report, High and Dry, How Water Issues Are Stranding Assets, showed that $13.5 billion has already been stranded across only 4 major infrastructure projects. They're all shown in the, well, 3 of them are shown in these lovely pictures here. We have the Carmichael coal mine in Australia. We have the XL pipeline in Canada. We had the Oyster Creek nuclear power station in the US. So all of these projects were expected to produce income, but changes in water regulation, high levels of pollution, ecosystem destruction, and community opposition led to delays, liabilities, and in some cases, the cancellation of these projects entirely, leaving the financial institutions who invested in them high and dry. We do love our puns here at CDP. With this year's Global Water Report, though, we wanted to push the conversation further to show that water security is no longer being considered just a question of risk, but one of real financial value ready to be captured by companies and understood by financial institutions. To support our UN advocacy efforts, we also wanted to show that the private sector is taking action on water and that governments need to step up to support this positive progress. The report, I hope the QR code works, Riding the Wave, shows how CDP corporate responders across every industry are already benefiting from water-related opportunities that relate to efficiency, resilience, markets, and the development of new products and services. Altogether, the financial impact of these opportunities for 2022 valued out at over $436 billion, which worked out to be $250 million per company. You can see the graph here. You can see the average number of reported opportunities per organization by sector and opportunity type. So we have many examples from different companies in different sectors and different regions. We have Ecolab, who they're based in the US and they're responding to increasing demand for water efficient products. There's Fresh Del Monte, who are saving water through new irrigation systems in their banana plantations in Guatemala. They're also therefore saving money. There's Samsung in Korea, which is implementing programs to reduce water consumption across their organization. I'm delighted to have WaterAid here in the room because there's also Diageo, HSBC, Twinings, and Ecotera, who have all through WaterAid's Boosting Business project, found that for every $1 spent on wash projects, their return on investment was around roughly $2 through reduced absenteeism, increased productivity, and decreased wash-related medical costs. I'll be giving you, everyone loves a story, so I have some more stories like this soon. But all of this information you can gather in the opportunities questionnaire, in the water security questionnaire. Hands up if you're aware of those questions. Okay, probably about 10 hands up went up in the room. So I'm talking about W4.3 and 4.3a. And all of these opportunities they're not insignificant. They all have the potential to have a really substantive, positive, financial or strategic impact on the overall business. 1,719 companies reported nearly 3,000 opportunities, but 55% didn't report any, and they're missing out on millions. Our analysis showed that companies which have integrated water into their high-level business strategy are 4 times likely to realize water-related opportunities. So obviously a good step for companies yet to realize any opportunities is to integrate water into business strategy. Although the most common opportunity reported to CDP was to do with efficiency, most of the financial value is coming from the development of low water impact products and services as companies start to transition away from water intensive and polluting products. From permeable concrete to washing up liquid, sugar, to bank loans, 40% of companies responding to CDP are already identifying, innovating, and introducing new offerings to business customers and individual consumers. 2 examples: Unilever's brand of dishwashing liquid called Sunlight. This uses much less water than its other brands and has outpaced category growth in water scarce markets. The bank loan example is also really interesting. I think we have some BBVA people in the audience, so do put hello there. BBVA last year implemented the world's first ever water footprint loan with the power generation company Iberdrola. If Iberdrola get a good CDP water score and decrease their water consumption, they will pay a lower interest rate. But unlike low carbon products and services, there isn't yet a standardized definition of what constitutes a low water impact product or service. No supporting taxonomies or frameworks yet. This report therefore calls for a definition that can really help us assess and compare the benefits and legitimacy of these products and services. And we also advocate for companies to really work with their supply chain to reduce water impacts in products and services. Only 14% of companies encourage innovation in this way, and less than 1% offer the financial incentives to do so. So an untapped area full of potential there. The report closes with 3 stories of companies who are striding out on their water transition journeys. All of these companies scored an A for their responses to the water security and actually climate change questionnaires, and they've all reduced their withdrawals since 2015. Who owns a Fujifilm camera here? Oh, no one. Maybe there are some people online because, and this is pretty cool, Fujifilm are drawing on their experience making camera film to develop products based on ion exchange membranes to filter and treat water. And through CDP, they are also showing really strong internal water governance, including C-suite remuneration for the achievement of water security targets. Does anyone here own a Ford car? One hand up there in the middle. So Ford has reduced their water withdrawals by 40% since 2015. This is through water saving technology, but they also have a tool called a 100-point tool, which is used to ensure that water issues are integrated into business objectives across the board. Ford has also implemented an internal supply chain program through which suppliers set withdrawal reduction targets and also report their progress. L'Oreal, they have an R&D program called Waterless, and that's helping them develop low water impact products. Think solid shampoo. This is helping them gain additional market share. They're also designing a product labeling system which will include details on water stress and eco-toxicity, which they report a potential financial benefit of $160 million over the next 4 to 6 years. So that's the end of this section, the first third of the session today. I've just gone through with you the business case for acting on water for companies, spoken about the Global Water Report, which really focuses in on these water-related opportunities and the financial value that can be gained from realising them. I would now love to welcome up on the stage Marianne, who is the Water Agriculture Manager at Danone. And as you all know, Danone is the French multinational food company. Welcome, Marianne. Thank you for joining me today. Are you well?
Yeah, good.
Good. So Danone operates in the food, bev and ag sector, which is a sector that has huge impacts on water resources, accounting for 75% to 80% of water use worldwide. Our report, it's really encouraging to see really high numbers of opportunities being reported from the sector, including those to do with improving water efficiency, resilience to climate change and other shocks, and implementing WASH initiatives also in the communities they operate. So Danone is one of the companies that reported to us, and we featured them in the report. Could you talk us through Danome's process in identifying and prioritizing water opportunities?
Yes. So hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting us. I hope you can hear me well. Yes, as you said, so Danone is a food and beverage industry, actually. So we have like water in more or less all of our activities. We are bottled water. We have like water for our process. We have we need water to grow the commodities that we're buying. So it's quite a transversal topic. And in the end, our business depends on these resources. But I mean, we're not the only one concerned about this dependency to these resources, because there is also need to have water for other businesses and for the communities and also for the ecosystems. So we have this dependency and impacts, like the materiality approach that we indeed really wanted to highlight here. So thank you for letting like the stage to say this. And in the end, we started in 2011 to assess our water footprints, because the water footprint assessment is a great way to assess the impact of your activities. And for year 2022, actually, we have like 89% of our total water footprint that takes place upstream in the value chain. Like it's a prioritization process saying that, okay, supply chain is a topic for water. And on the other way around, we also decided to assess our risks. So how our business can be exposed to the risks. And again, about considering the three different scopes that we have. So the factories, the watersheds, and the supply chain. We decided to apply the same methodology, the materiality methodology. So we have the business variables that we add, of course, to the materiality assessment. We have the impact. So how much water do we need to abstract, or do we depend on? And the last one is the water risk exposure based on the location. So we, of course, need to have a better traceability, transparency upstream. So I think that's all of the peers and yeah, in the food and beverage industry can understand it. So as I just joined Danone, just as a sharing experience, in January 2023, I had the chance to go through this journey of actualizing, updating this overall process. And it's a great way to structure your strategy. What do you want to commit to? And to better understand what kind of activities do you have. And as kind of one of the key takeaways that we had during this journey is for the supply chain, we are like a dairy industry, but we are not just, milk is just not the only water material ingredients. We also have nuts, we also have fruits that we need to focus on in order to secure our business.
Wonderful, thank you. Could you tell me a little bit more about the types of interventions that Danone is planning to address water security in the business and your value chain?
Yeah, sure. So here I will be focusing on example of the supply chain and sharing two kind of interventions that we can have. The first one being leverage from the procurement strategies. In the end, it's a great way having this kind of prioritization of, okay, this kind of ingredient is important, is exposed. So how can we work with the procurement teams to say, we need to secure your supply chain? And then go on the field and better understand the local dynamics, the science, what kind of watershed is at risks, what is really exposed, and build on that to design some landscape projects so that we can really generate impactful actions on the ground for the farmers, but not only, they're also like part of the watersheds bodies, but they are not the only ones. So that one example, like using this structural key takeaways and results to design, to prioritize countries, to prioritize even watersheds, and also multiple ingredients, because sometimes you're sourcing different ingredients from the same region so that you can like make the most of the different action you do. And the second like example would be more like innovation, because we have a 360 projects that we have in our activities in our plants in Northern Africa and Morocco. So we have like some dairy plants over there. And in the end, we want to test how the reuse of the wastewater treatment over there, the wastewater, sorry, can be reused for agricultural purposes. And the agricultural purposes, commodities that are already irrigated here, over there, could be a great way to understand how we can substitute the water source. And in the end, if it can be successful, we will have a real impact on the groundwater resources, because we won't need abstraction anymore.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yeah. And to have a real impact at the basin level, as you've already mentioned, many stakeholders need to come together. Action can be scaled up if many people are on board within a particular geography. So do you have any recommendations for other businesses about how they can work together, particularly at basin level, to help realize and scale these kind of opportunities?
What we like believe in is the collective action mindset, and in between, like, to be pre-competitive, like all together. If I take once again, the example of the farmer, for instance, we will need to buy one kind of the cereals he's growing out of 3 years. But how can we like influence him to really engage a real transition towards like less impactful practices to soil, but of course water as well, if we're just 30% of its interest? So the idea would be, how can we at the plot level, for instance, think collectively and join forces to align our requirements so that we can have a big impact on scale and on the ground at the watershed level. And I would just add as well, it's not just a matter of considering the business as partners, but also all of the other watershed bodies. We really want to like engage all of the non-business bodies around the table, not like the public authorities, the local authorities, and like NGO, civil society, to align our agenda with theirs, so that we can indeed join forces and like canalize the energy we want to implement on the ground to generate big impact. So yeah, that's it.
Fabulous. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you very much.
So we will have a chance for Q&A after the panel discussion. We will also be joined by your colleague, Jian. And so if you do have questions, store them up or write them in. If you're online, put them in the chat, and my colleague, Erica, will be communicating them to me. But thank you. Can I have another round of applause for Marianne? So we've been sat down for a while now. Again, this is another chance to have a little shake, a little wiggle, and we'll be welcoming up the panel onto the stage and also online. So we've selected this panel to situate corporate action within the wider landscape of policy, regulation, investor and consumer pressure. On the stage, we have Dawn. Would you like to join me here, Dawn? She's the business engagement lead for China Water Risk. So CWR was launched in 2011 to increase engagement with global businesses and investment communities. I've heard you have an excellent far-reaching network around the efficient and responsible use of China's water resources, and has since then led the expansion of global water risks conversations worldwide. So welcome, Dawn.
Thank you.
We also have Pedro joining online. So Pedro is the environment leader at the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, EFRAG. EFRAG's member organizations are committed to the development of international financial reporting standards. Pedro is actually an ex-CDPer, having spent 13 years overseeing CDP's data, questionnaire, or scoring methodology. So it's good to see Pedro again. Not last but not least, of course, we have Matthias, Head of Sustainability Research at EcoWorld. And EcoWorld is a German-based investment company which focuses on ethical and ecological investments. EcoWorld conducts sustainability research into to identify potential investment opportunities. And Matthias is the head of this team. So really great to have you here. And Pedro. But my first question is to Matthias. So what are some of the key initiatives that you have put forwards over the last few years to really leverage opportunities to act on water security?
Yeah, thank you for the question and for having us here. As an asset manager, we are a pure player, a sustainable pure player we manage 5 funds, and we have an in-house approach. So the analysts are located near Düsseldorf. We don't buy any data from outside except some data from CDP. And we have 2 stages. So it's just if we say as the sustainability research team that a company is sustainable, then our colleagues can invest. So we've been working with water data for more than 30 years now. And of course, with your data, that is to us very valuable. And I think this is our key initiative, yeah, to say we invest in a company or we don't invest in a company. I have another key initiative. Last week on Monday, I came back from California so right before the earthquake hit and the tropical storm Hillary. And I talked to different companies, and one company was California Water, for example, and they have really a lovely, great team, very highly experts in their field, and very passionate. And they ask us, there are a lot of reporting schemes, and they want to know, because they have to focus what data they should disclose. And then of course we mentioned CDP, and we do an impact there. And I think that it's really crucial to encourage these guys and to talk to them and to engage. This is, to me, a function of an asset manager too. And so that's why I'm very happy that you are having us here and we go to this discussion, because we all know there's a long way to go, but we don't have time. So thank you for having us, Miriam. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for being here. My next question is to Pedro. The new SBTN guidelines for setting freshwater targets and ESRS regulations also were launched this year. Do you anticipate, Pedro, that this will incentivize more companies to act on water security and realize these opportunities? So that was my first question. And the second one, where are other water-related opportunities? Where are the other water-related opportunities and other upcoming standards and frameworks?
So, hi Miriam, good to see you. Good afternoon all. I hope you can hear me okay. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting IFRAG. Apologies for the remote participation. It's a bit more difficult. I will save resources. I would love to be there with all of you. So on your question, will we anticipate there to be more incentives for companies to act on water disclosure? I mean, it's a firm yes. We believe that these mandatory disclosure requirements for companies to report on water when it is a material issue for them will incentivize companies to act on water security. Also because in terms of the ESRSs, we have a strong component also on not only on targets, but also on actions and plans to achieve those targets. I would say that, however, these incentive from the measuring and reporting to meaningful action takes some time, and that is, I would say, normal. From my experience at CDP, also, we would, usually observe a lag between the start of measuring and reporting and then acting on things. This can take a couple of years, maybe a little bit longer, depending on companies. With mandatory disclosure, many more companies will have to disclose, and some very large that are already disclosing and have been disclosing for a very long time, like Danone, and that are leaders on their sectors, to the very small and smaller companies who may be approaching some of these issues in a very structured way for the first time. So yes, a strong incentive, we believe. It will lead to more action. It will not be immediate. Now, on water opportunities, I guess I need to acknowledge something that most of you will recognize, which is, in terms of reporting, there is a kind of natural bias towards risk reporting more than opportunity reporting. And that bias is there also in the ESRSs. I think here it's actually up to the companies to see the opportunities that every risk contains. And companies will be able to use their sustainability reporting to showcase their solutions or the competitive advantage, also from the point of view of their water security practices or technology products that they have. So that space and visibility for the water opportunities is there for them to grab. That's for sure. Yeah, maybe I'll finish here.
Thank you, Pedro. I'm just wondering if anyone has any questions, firstly, from the audience to Matthias and Pedro. We do have a longer Q&A session at the end, but this is a time, if anyone has any burning questions now, please do ask them. I'm going to see. I can't hear anything because I don't have my headphones on, but no questions from the audience yet. Okay, cool. Well, then we can move on to a question to CWR. So our report mentions a YouGov survey, which was commissioned by Water Witness International last year, that found that out of the 2,000 people surveyed, 96% were concerned about their water footprint, and more than half were actually willing to pay more for a product that carried a certification of responsible water use. With this in mind, can you tell us a little bit more about where the additional pressure is coming from for companies to for corporate apps in water?
Sure, thanks, Miriam. And it's actually the areas that I mentioned will build on what Matthias and Pedro said. And I see 4 key areas of pressure. The first is from the financial community and capital markets. And that's from investors to banks to central banks to also regulators and exchanges. And we're seeing this through the disclosure requirements coming from them or being asked. It's not all as mandatory yet. There's the TCFD, Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. We're seeing stress testing being asked against climate scenarios. There's going to be the TNFB on, the Task Force on Biodiversity-Related Financial Disclosure. So finance is interested, and that's putting pressure on the companies to get on top of their risks, and especially for water. The second is a bit what you've just mentioned in the survey, and that's consumers and the public. Don't know if any people in the room have noticed. I have. The news these days, there's so much more coverage about climate change and water. It's floods, droughts, the wildfires at the moment. It seems every month things are getting worse. And people are like, well, why are we feeling this? And water is a very obvious way to feel it. Too much floods, too little droughts. We needed to put the wildfires out. So people are becoming educated on water like they haven't before. And that also goes into their spending habits. And you've mentioned, especially the younger generations who have grown up with this as their issue for their generation to solve. They want greener products. And within that, it's now getting down to water. So less water intensive products. You mentioned earlier, L'Oreal have their waterless products now. And the surveys do say they'll pay more. Whether that's happening, that a little slower than the willingness, but that's another area of pressure to companies, right? The consumers are demanding it. The third is actually other companies. There's a certain ego in the corporate world and competition, and they all want to be the best on water. But also with water, unlike energy, and Marie spoke to at the beginning, you need collective action because water flows, from upstream to down. We are users and the next people are users. And if you're really going to tackle water issues, you need to do it at the basin level. And that's collective action. That's within companies, but also the stakeholders at the basin. And the fourth area of added pressure, I would say, is water itself. Companies, they're thinking, how am I going to ensure my future water supply? they're getting flooded. The supply chains, the factories, there's droughts. Semiconductor companies in Taiwan are paying farmers not to farm so they can have the water. Mm-hmm. So water itself, literally having access and also the quality is becoming an added pressure.
Fantastic. For companies in the room who are interested in seeing what their competitors are doing on water, other companies working in the same sector, you have the ability to download a limited number of responses, CDP water responses, through our website. It's really worth taking a look to see how other companies are responding to water-related risks, seizing those opportunities, developing new products and services, and also how they're operating in specific basins at a facility level. So now we're going to try something a bit different, because our panelists are going to ask questions of each other. I think I've done enough talking. So first, Dawn, I think you might have
I've got a question for Matthias, which I spent ages crafting. How can financial institutions best use water-related disclosure to leverage action? And which metrics are needed and what for?
Yeah, which metrics are needed? This is a very, very good question. I think it depends a little bit on the purpose and the perspective. Yeah, we talked about the risk perspective. Pedro did it outside in, and we are more like an impact investor. So we look at the impacts of businesses on environment and people. And of course, there are certain questions you have in the questionnaire are important to us. For example, about withdrawn water from water-stressed regions, or how's water treated and discharged, all these questions to us. It's very important, the value chain. We mentioned it today. This is really a thing I think companies could speed up to engage, to work together in the value chain, and then it's easier for all sides. About recycling, there's great initiatives going on. I was at a company in Denmark last year, and they have a facility, a production facility, and they use 99% of all water in closed loops, and it's even not a chemical treatment, but a biological one. So it's really cool. But to me, to be honest, all is about two things. I have to understand the business model of a company. Yeah, the business model. This is to me, it's crucial because yeah, otherwise, how can I decide? Yeah, so for example, I don't want to invest in industrial agriculture. EcoWorld don't invest. Yeah, other companies do, because we think they don't feed the world, but destroy it with artificial fertilizers and pesticides, for example. And I have to understand business models. And the second thing is, you mentioned it before, to me, it's about a clear strategy. So a clear water strategy embedded in the overall strategy. And if a company is able to explain it to me, the business model and the strategy, then I have a good message to everybody here, because I don't think that we need perfect data. Yeah, we need sufficient information. At least in my work, if I have sufficient information to be able to decide, then to me it's okay. So just start and jump into it. You don't have to be perfect. This is my message to the company's world, and that's why I'm thinking about drivers, and I would like to raise a question to Pedro, because what do you think, Pedro? When it comes to regulation, yeah. So I think this is a driver, but where do you see regulations around water disclosure? Let's say heading in the next 5 years, and is it enough to get us to a water secure future, or at least on track, Pedro?
So it's hard to say. The first thing is that in terms of regulation for environmental disclosure or sustainability disclosure, I think the expectation is that we will see a lot more mandates around the world. So following Europe as a region, but also following the important work that the ISP is doing in doing international sustainability standards. We will see adoption of those standards by different jurisdictions, and that will hopefully set a minimum common denominator. And we hopefully see with the adoption of those mandates is increased practice of sustainability by all companies globally. And I think that is probably the most important thing. So again, having worked at CDP for many years, we are used to collaborate with many of the leaders, to preach to many and to somehow convert them. But there are many, many companies that simply do not respond. And we do need to have a common playing field there. And that is a very important aspect of the regulation on disclosures. I mean, in terms of other regulation, I would say that more than regulation, we need policy, and we need a lot more water governance. And I just want to go a little bit deeper on this aspect of the water governance. First, because I think it's so critical, and then because I think disclosure and transparency, which are the topics that are close to my heart, they play an important role here. So in particular, when companies start disclosing or not disclosing, if that is the result of their materiality assessment, there will be ample space for citizen as well as investor scrutiny and a more democratic discussion on resource allocation, and also on this critical issue, which is how much many companies are subsidized in their use of natural capital that is not cost appropriately. So I think that aspect of the discussion on the governance of the commons by the private sector will be a very important discussion. There is a role here to play with technology, data technology, to make all these data publicly available and intelligible by everyone that wants to use it. And I think overall, in the next 5 years, I hope that we will see an acceleration of the debates on natural capital governance. And I hope that these will be underpinned by access to location-based hard environmental data, let's say like this. And a lot of these will be fed by corporate reporting. And I will take the opportunity to make a question to Don, which is, you have here someone that is working on disclosure regulation. And I would like to ask you, what would you recommend a regulator for future disclosures on water security, and how this would help support the companies or the financial institutions you work with to realize opportunities for water security?
Thanks, Pedro. The first thing I would say is that we need a clear and common language and framework. And that actually has been a conversation we've been having for years now. But a framework has just been launched, actually, by the ISSB, and it's the IFRS S1 and S2. And basically, these are new disclosure frameworks. The first one, S1, is on all sustainability-related financial disclosure. And this is still focusing on finance due to the regulatory nature of the question. S2 is actually all about climate. And so finally, we're going to have at least these two standards that globally everyone will be reporting, disclosing to. So it's a new baseline, and it'll be a common language. Because at the moment, if you know the disclosure world well, there's CDP, which has been really shaping the space, but there's also GRI, there's SASIB, there's the TCFD I mentioned before. So there's all these different disclosure platforms and frameworks, and it's extra work for companies, and then for investors, you know, it's looking across the board. And even now, though, with the launch of the S1 and S2, there's still questions within the community on how they're going to integrate. And you don't want to duplicate work. So we still need to get clearer. We've become a common framework, but we need to become clearer in our language and frameworks. The second is that we need to make disclosure more manageable, because like I've said before, there was multiple platforms, and they're required by investors, companies, to disclose across all of them. And there was some integration, but not totally. So you can imagine the work for particularly large corporate global corporations. But while we make them manageable, I think what we need to input to make that possible is some flexibility, but not too much. Because then it happens that when you go into the actual data disclosed in the frameworks, companies have disclosed what they want. So you're not able to see like for like. And that's, you know, that's not making the data useful. And a bit to what Matthias said, you know, we don't need it perfect, but we need it good enough, and we need it across the world and across sectors good enough, right? We don't have time for perfect. And with that flexibility and manageability is we need to be mindful that there are a huge amount of SMEs, right? We're all talking large MNCs, but we need to make this feasible also for SMEs. It can't be too high of a threshold for disclosure, because these are going to matter more and more as the global population increases. You know, we continue with globalization. SMEs are going to matter in the climate discussion. So how do we get them disclosing? And the third kind of builds a bit what Pedro said is, you know, companies operate in different jurisdictions. So where you need some alignment, some base alignment across jurisdictions, because then not only are we disclosing to various platforms and frameworks, we're then having different requirements in different jurisdictions. And this can be something that, you know, the exchanges can push and look at, but ideally kind of a global agreement would be ideal, but anyway, yeah.
Thanks all. Just on the SME point, we have an SME-focused questionnaire at CDP, which is a streamlined version of the rather comprehensive full corporate version to make it easier for those smaller, often supply chain organisations to disclose to us. So that's the panel discussion. We now have a good half an hour for questions, so please don't be shy. I see a hand up there, 2 hands up actually, but before, I'd love to welcome back on stage Danone to participate in the Q&A session. So we have Gian and Marianne. I'm also going to have to put this on. I actually have, though, to start with, a question coming in from online. And it goes back to what is enough data. It's going to be posed to Matthias. So how can you tell if a company has gathered enough data? Please do join me. Yeah. And when do diminishing returns begin?
Yeah. This is not easy to answer because it really depends on the industry and therefore on materiality for topics and on the company. So I can't answer this in that way. So maybe afterwards, I don't know where the question is coming from. We can talk about that, and then I have to know what company it is. So, but to us, it's material. You mentioned, by the way, I come back to the question. You mentioned the new standards. We shouldn't. I'm sorry, but we should not call them sustainability reporting. It's more a market efficiency reporting because it's an outside-in perspective. Yeah, sustainability is about the impacts. Yeah, and this is to our approach. Yet I come back to the question. I have to know the product benefit, the benefit of the product and the services, and then the design. This is to us, it's the most important part. So if I understand the products and the impacts, then to me would be this would be enough in the first stages. And then of course we at EcoWorld we look at the processes in the production and in the value chain and in the reporting. But you know, we have different challenges out there, and we need products, we need housing, we need mobility. Yeah, there are some things we don't need, but if I think in terms of the stages, do we need the product and how is it shaped? Yeah, you can when you, for example, if you think in terms of mobility, there are different ways to be mobile. Yeah, but I'm sorry, I can't answer this just like that. Yeah. Okay.
Just on a question on the products, how do you determine if we need a product or not?
Yeah, we need education. Yeah, we have to eat. We need a house or something like that. We need to be mobile. We don't need, for example, in our approach, luxury things, for example. Yeah, and we need clothes, at least in the winter. Yeah, and but then it depends. For example, we don't invest much in the textile and clothing industry because you know all the problems out there. Yeah, and we need a lot of things, but then I think the second step is very important. How are things produced?
So making them as efficient where possible. I saw a couple of hands up. Let's go to the woman in the stripy top.
Hi, thank you. I actually have two questions. The first question is, we hear about the water disclosure, but also carbon and biodiversity. And I guess in many places, there's activities that can address all of those things at the same time. And so is that something that businesses are looking for when you get those additionalities, just through sort of like one strategic investment in change? And I guess the second question is, so I work for a conservation organization, and you're talking, you know, this is obviously very business oriented and how they, you know, what businesses can do. But as a conservation organization, I have no idea how I would even begin to connect with businesses, either SMEs or larger corporations, or even to understand sort of how the work that we're doing on the ground, which is delivering, you know, all of these different kinds of benefits. Like, how do we then get connected into the business world to be able to sort of work in partnership? Thanks.
Fantastic, thank you. So that first question about integrating climate and water concerns into initiatives, you know, identifying those synergies in new projects and ideas, initiatives. Danone, is that something, who would like to take that question?
You gave regenerative agriculture examples before, right? Yes, but I can start and maybe you can continue, but with the new regulations, European ones coming in, the CSRD, we have the double materiality, and we want to have choice actually to integrate better the water, carbon, biodiversity. It's going to be an integrated approach, because at the end you need to understand the landscapes that are more material to you, and you need to implement programs in those landscapes. Usually at Danone, when we do that, we are trying to understand the different challenges and pressures this landscape is facing, and then we develop different business cases for the different activities. And those activities are not necessarily only delivering water benefits, they deliver carbon, biodiversity. I fully agree with you, and I think, and I guess maybe CDP will go towards maybe more integrated reporting as well. I don't know, but that will be very supportive, let's say. And so, yeah, one of the leverage is regenerative agriculture practices, and so I don't know if you have one example you would like to highlight more than another that you haven't disclosed before.
Yes, maybe it would be the idea of, if we take the example of soil covering, for instance. We know it's like capture carbon, it stores carbon in the soil, and then also prevent runoffs, and then help like green water to get back to like the soil. So in the end, and also increase the biodiversity in the soil. So having this practices approach, we know that are impactful in a good sense at the landscape. We try to have this systemic and holistic approach. But I would have, if I may, a question to a conservation partner, that is, how can you support us to have science-based KPI, science-based baseline? Because in a sense, when we want to implement some stuff, it's definitely needed to know where are we starting from to better identify what kind of improvements can we make. And to, like today, it's quite complicated because it's complex to have all of the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the biodiversity, which is also quite like a big topic that still needs to be defined and clarified. So happy to help. Thank you very much. Good.
I would just add a little that biodiversity, it's weird hearing yourself. Biodiversity, it's an area that's got a lot of attention at the moment. There was COP15 where that was like, it decided there'd be a biodiversity framework, valuing the biodiversity. That's a huge conversation at the moment. And I mean, it would be the time to input and see how that can play a bigger role in corporates and allocating the money and also disclosure. And I mean, there is a TNFD, for Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosure. So I would look into that as well.
And yes, we are looking at integrating our questionnaires. So we have our climate, forest and water questionnaire, but within that we also now have plastics questions in our water security questionnaire. We have biodiversity questions in our climate change questionnaire. We're looking at expanding into oceans in the future. So we are exploring what an integrated questionnaire will look like and where we can identify those connections and those synergies and trade-offs. The gentleman behind the, who I'm now calling the woman in the stripy top.
Hi, everyone. This is Abhishek from Unilever. Before I ask my question, just to the prior one, to make a comment on behalf of Unilever, also very much echo what Jehan and Marianne said. Integrated solutions are efficient, and we're all about making sure that we can have the biggest impact for our investments. So would I just like to echo that. My question, I think, is primarily for Don and Pedro, and it's about corporate ambitions. So more, I guess, the opportunity space rather than the risks from a disclosure perspective. If I think about carbon and climate, there kind of is at least a common floor, if not an ambition, which is net zero, and everybody's marching towards that, you know, and some diversity in timeframes and scope and so on, but that's sort of a North Star. When it comes to water ambitions, there's still quite a range: net zero impact, replenishment targets, net water positive, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious if you see a convergence from a data sort of where companies have been going over the last years, but as well from a regulatory perspective, something coming down the road is actually, guys, all of these are great ambitions, but this is where you all need to be working towards in delivery from either a regulatory perspective or the interpretation of SDG 6 as we translate that into the role of the private sector. Just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Pedro, you want to go first, or I can go? You go. You go.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's a great question. I think that this common floor on water, I mean, water is more complex because it's more local. But I think there is, at least from the conversation, something that is becoming more normative, which is even the reference to water security as a concept. which has multiple dimensions. And I think, water positive and some of these other concepts out there, they will converge to something. Exactly what that something will be is not totally clear to me at the moment. But again, what we expect is that we will be able to sort water security issues by increased transparency on water use with local water context, and so framing it from a water perspective, water security perspective. The ESRSs, and this is something I wanted to call the attention, we have a double materiality perspective. We have a multi-stakeholder perspective. And so in terms of water security, it's not just about the risks or what companies may be doing. We need to hear the perspectives of local communities, of NGOs, of other stakeholders, and through this increased transparency on water use and the multi-stakeholder perspective, we will enhance the conversation on governance to achieve water security. So again, I don't know exactly what will be the buzzword, but I expect that these two things will be fundamental. Increased governance on the common resource, which is drinking water, and increased focus on the availability of the resource for a range of different uses.
Well, Pedro stole my opener. I was going to say water is complex as well. But I will add as well that water is multidimensional. Carbon is much more simple. 1 ton of carbon is the same whether it's in Stockholm, whether it's in Singapore, whether it's in France. And carbon has had the attention and the focus of corporates, academia, scientists, governments. Water is still very misunderstood. So that's why we're seeing quite a spectrum in corporate targets on water. The gentleman with the question from Unilever, is it water positive? Is it water neutral? Is it replenishment targets? And a little bit like biodiversity, because water doesn't have that structure that carbon has for net zero, it is an opportunity to set what we want it to mean. And actually quite a few corporates around the world have set water positive or water neutral targets. There is a coalition with a rough definition of what it should mean, but it doesn't have to mean that. So I think when you're reading the corporate targets, it's also finding out what it means to them, because that will show their real ambition levels, right? Because also you could be water positive and replenish 1% more of water than you use, or you could 50% more. And then also how much water, what water are you accounting for? Is it just in your operations? Is it in your supply chain? Is it your raw materials? And these are tough questions, but this is, where corporates can now kind of build and take the lead. And that's an area that could be very exciting for water. Yeah.
That connects nicely to a question that we've just had come through online. We do have the development of the science-based targets. So the freshwater methodologies are being published, at least steps 1 to 3. But while the freshwater hub and the science-based targets work through verification, and also
the other aspects of a science-based target for nature, land use change, other nature aspects, while they're still being developed, how can we make it easier to credibly determine where to prioritise action towards sustainable water balances? Would you like to?
I can try, because to me, and maybe I didn't really understand, but SBTN is not a prioritization tools for decision making within a company. To my understanding, SBTN is to help you prioritize which type of interventions you need to do at base within a landscape you have prioritized upfront. So, yeah, that will be my answer somehow. It's like, I think you have many other tools to prioritize decisions within your company, like, is it double materiality, for example? Once you have defined where you want to act, yes, you can use SBTN to understand the context better and, yes, the pressures this context is under. But maybe you have other thoughts.
Yeah, I would like to add something. Double materiality is better than single materiality, but it's not enough in my eyes, unfortunately. Yeah, because we have planetary boundaries, and even with double materiality, and when we know, okay, we are better than yesterday, we are better than the competitor, we don't know if we're good enough. So unfortunately, I know that's very difficult, but we should know our budget, what's left, at least in biodiversity and climate, and if we have a look to the oceans with different criteria. So yeah, I'm sorry, this is important, yeah, to think what budget is left. But I know it's very difficult to report or to assess in that way.
I might just add a little on the priority front. You can look at it from different lenses. Internally, what are key priority areas for your corporation? You know, strategic for future growth. What's the priority of the water scarcity of that location? How much of a water steward do you want to be? And then also you need to look at the basin. So you might be taking water from a municipality, the utility system, but is the basin at risk? Where you are might be fine, but the basin might not be. And then you're not being a good water steward if you're just taking water from where you are. You know, you need to be looking at your whole water flow. So I would add many different areas of priorities. You can pick which one.
And there is a Science-Based Targets Network event tomorrow taking place during World Water Week, I think around midday. So do check that out.
And we have one of our business units is part of the SBTN new pilot, Alpro, and we can, if people are interested, we can share our learnings.
Fantastic.
And
so
I
a few
just
hands up. The gentleman, yes, wherever you're pointing. Okay, fantastic. In the tie. And please do introduce yourself and
Absolutely.
what organisation you
represent.
represent. Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks very much. My name's Ken Irvin. I work at the Institute for Water Education in Delft in the Netherlands. I'm a freshwater ecologist, and I've been working very closely with something known as the World Water Quality Alliance, which is being sort of platformed by UNEP. So that's the introduction before the question. And with the World Water Quality Alliance, we have just produced a white paper or a position paper on embedding lakes into sustainability agenda. And we're trying to go beyond the usual bilateral conversations. So, you know, I know many ecologists who actually don't know any business people. And I suspect there are many business people who don't have that conversation with the ecologists. And I think I really welcome what you've said about that connection. But the specific question, and I have many, but I'm going to ask you one, is there's lots of talk about green finance, and there's the Coral Reef Initiative Coalition, which seems to have cracked the mechanism at a sort of global level for financing protection of coral reefs through green finance. And I'm wondering if any of the panel have any inspired or good advice of how, for example, the World Water Quality Alliance, bunch of ecologists and water quality folk can start grappling with this idea of green finance, or is it just another buzzword in a sea of nature-based solutions?
Yep, I can jump in here. If you're talking quality and you think of water, immediately, or my mind also goes to wastewater, and you're talking green finance as well. And some area that is emerging, and that actually we've had quite a few discussions around here, is around the GHG from wastewater treatment and utilities. And so that is a way to get finance more interested initially, right? Because as the UK utilities set a 2030 target to be net zero, the water utilities. And in that, they say they'll save 10 million tons of GHGs. Now that's a financing opportunity, right? So if you link it to the wastewater, you link it to the, like, that's treated, you can get the carbon from the treatment, and then the quality improves. So that could be one area to start engagement.
Yeah, maybe I add something. Yeah, you ask about green finance as a buzzword. Of course, you can do green finance in different ways. So there are good initiatives, and then there are initiatives I wouldn't recommend. And if you talk about nature and coral reefs, so people say with 2 degrees, coral reefs are gone. So yeah, and we will be at 3, 4, I guess. So we have to find new solutions, and not only to finance, but to rebuild the nature. And we have to find the business cases for that. And I don't have answers for that. But without new technologies and without finding the business cases, so we have to find it. Then we have a future, yes. But to your question with green finance, yeah, you have to look into initiatives in detail in every case, yeah.
Before we go to another question from the audience here in the room, I've had a question come through from the online audience, and it's actually for Marianne and Jan. We learned in the Global Water Report that 14% of companies are working with their supply chain to innovate new low water impact products and services, but only 1% are offering financial incentives to do so. One of the issues engaging supply chain is supplier fragmentation. So how do you deal with supplier fragmentation to reduce water use and implement new technologies, seize these new initiatives?
Yeah, so strictly for Danone, it's important to notice that we are supply chain, we don't have the same role according to what ingredient you're talking about. So in the end, we are buying directly from farmers for the milk, but we are not buying directly for farmers for other ingredients. So you don't have the same leverage, you don't have the same also the same tools to and yeah, words you can use to enhance some kind of a transition. But indeed we have the project I was mentioning like before at the landscape scale, where it's kind of priority for us. We designed a landscape approach project in the southern of Spain, because almond is quite a topic when you talk about water, of course. And in terms of how can we engage suppliers, there is really a procurement strategy that we would like to work on the reduction of the water footprints. But the idea is, how can we make it sustainable? It's just not a matter, again, just to loop and ripple about what was said before. It's not just a water perspective, it's how can we also store carbon, how can we just provide some kind of biodiversity to enjoy like long-term farming, because in the southeast of Spain, if we are not supporting any farming are just going to be out of the economy. It's going to be like solar panels, it's going to be like urbanization, because it's no longer profitable. So indeed we have some kind of a role to play. But again, business models, I really agree with you. We need it to make it like some kind of collective and some kind of how can all together we can find a financial way to respond to these key challenges, which is who is going to pay. We are parts of the solution, but we're not like the entire solution.
Thank you. We have 4 more minutes. Okay, the woman at the back has her hand very strongly up. So let's have this as the last question.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. So we talk a lot about water quantity and water stress and risks from water-stressed areas, but what about water quality and disclosure on water quality and the risks associated with water quality coming in as well as water quality leaving?
So what about water quality?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And kind of piggybacking on what about the fragmentation of suppliers, textile industry, they operate in a very fragmented supply chains as well. And we've actually seen some cases with the companies that I work with. One of the biggest ones, they had a factory in China. And then in China at the moment, there are actually a lot of measuring and real-time reporting on wastewater effluent, right? They have standards they have to meet. And this one case, you know, they started to get fined because there was this pollutant in them. They're like, we don't even use this chemical. And it was coming from the water that they received, right? So they now had to pre-treat their water, pay for that to pre-treat their water, to use it, add a lot of chemicals themselves, then treat it to a certain standard, and then discharge. So quality is super crucial, and it's going to become more and more. I mean, 80% of global wastewater isn't treated. And that's just going to spread more and more into the oceans. It's becoming a marine issue. You know, it's spreading. So I don't have the answer, but quality, yeah, it's going to be a huge issue as well. And then when it's more polluted, it means you have less of it, right? Because you need to treat it and things like that.
Yes, but we see as well an opportunity of reusing wastewater in agriculture, for example. We have seen that emerging more and more, and many partners that are keen and open to try to modelize this reuse of wastewater. So it's true, it's a real topic, but it's a topic full of opportunity, I think.
Oh, totally agree, totally agree. Singapore, actually, they have something called New Water, and it's recycled wastewater. And it's done at a huge scale, right? It's about 30% or 20 to 30% of Singapore's water. Yeah, it's huge. And also they've just completed, or the slight delay, they're building, it's really fun, sewage superhighways, right? It's human-sized tunnels for like cars and trucks for sewage, so that they can, given that, you know, quality is going to be a growing issue, and water resources, freshwater resources are tight, they're going to take the opportunity to increase the infrastructure for recycled water, to use this wastewater to make it new again. And actually, they're one of the leaders on a sovereign, you know, size with up to 30%, like I mentioned. And part of that actually gets treated to ultra fine water, which is then crucial for the semiconductor industry. And that's all being done by the government, you know. So definitely a big opportunity as well.
A friend of mine is producing beer out of old bread, and he asked me if I would drink beer made from.
Isn't that in Singapore?
Made from no, it's in Germany. Yeah, and he asked me if I would drink beer made of treated wastewater, and I said yes, of course.
Okay, put your hands up if you drink beer made out of treated wastewater.
Oh yeah,
it's a bit of a divide.
The one in Singapore, they do beer. It's called New Brew because it's the new water. They're moving on to wine and whiskey and all of it, actually.
Oh.
The thing is, it's only possible where you have the enabling environment and regulations that allow you to reuse your wastewater. And it has been in some countries very complicated to actually be in capacity to reuse your wastewater. So this is where alignment between the public and the private sectors will make a difference. Otherwise, it won't be possible.
And what a fantastic way to finish. We're at time. We've come to the end of the session. You've probably run out of popcorn, but are full of ideas. And yeah, you've learnt a few things from our amazing panelists here. So I'm going to let's all give them a round of applause, like our neighbours. And I just wanted to thank the wonderful AV team and very importantly, my colleague Erica, who, even though I've just been on the stage representing CDP, has really been fundamental to this event. So thank you, Erica.
Yes, thank you.
Have a fantastic rest of World Water Week. Thank you, Pedro. And if you have any questions, do come up to us. We'll be around for 5 or so minutes.